The thunder cracked like a whip across the Montana sky as Fiona Zephyr ran breathlessly through the mud, her once fine dress now soaked and torn, clinging to her trembling body. Behind her, the mocking laughter of her family echoed with the storm, cruel words slicing deeper than the cold rain that pelted her face. 22 years of belittlement and scorn had finally broken her resolve, pushing her to flee the only home she'd ever known on this stormy April night in 1876. Tears mingled with raindrops as Fiona stumbled forward, her breath coming in ragged gasps. The jeers of her cousins still rang in her ears. "Foolish Fiona, thinking anyone would want to court a plain, bookish girl like you." Their laughter had erupted when she'd announced her intention to apply for a teaching position in the neighboring town. It was the final humiliation in a lifetime of them. The road ahead disappeared into darkness, and Fiona had no clear destination in mind. Her thin boots sank into the mud with each desperate step. The wind howled around her, drowning out the sound of approaching hoofbeats until they were nearly upon her. A horse reared up suddenly before her, its massive form materializing from the storm like a specter. Fiona screamed and fell backward into the mud, certain she was about to be trampled. Instead, the rider skillfully controlled the startled animal, bringing it to a halt mere feet from where she lay. "Miss, are you all right?" The man's voice cut through the storm, deep and concerned. Fiona could barely make out his silhouette against the stormy sky, broad-shouldered and tall in the saddle. Lightning flashed, illuminating a face weathered by sun and wind, yet surprisingly young. He couldn't be more than 26 or 27. A cowboy, judging by his attire, with a Stetson pulled low over eyes that studied her with evident concern. Fiona began, but her voice caught in her throat. How could she explain her situation to a complete stranger? That she had run away from her family with nowhere to go and no plan beyond escape. The rider dismounted in one fluid motion and approached her cautiously, as one might a frightened animal. "You're hurt," he said, noticing a cut on her hand where she'd fallen against a rock. "And half drowned by the looks of it." "I'm fine," Fiona insisted, though she was shivering violently. "Please, just go on your way." Another crack of lightning illuminated his face more clearly. His features were strong and defined, with a straight nose and a jawline shadowed with stubble. His eyes, though they held a kindness that made Fiona's chest ache with unexpected longing. "I can't leave you out here in this storm," he said firmly. "There's nowhere safe for miles." He extended a hand toward her. "I'm Owen Quinn. My ranch is about 3 miles east of here. Let me take you somewhere dry, at least until the storm passes." Fiona hesitated. Her entire life had been spent under the thumb of her uncle's family, enduring their constant belittlement after her parents had died when she was just 8 years old. Trust didn't come easily to her. "I don't know you, Mr. Quinn," she said, trying to inject strength into her trembling voice. A small smile touched his lips. "No, madam, you don't. But I give you my word as a gentleman that I mean you no harm. Sometimes fate puts people in our path when we need them most." Another roll of thunder emphasized his words, and the rain intensified. Fiona realized she had little choice. She could either trust this stranger or risk pneumonia or worse in the open countryside. "Fiona Zephyr," she said finally, accepting his outstretched hand. His grip was firm but gentle as he helped her to her feet. "Miss Zephyr, it's clear you're running from something, and it's not my place to pry. But no one should be out alone on a night like this." Before she could respond, Owen moved with surprising speed. He lifted her effortlessly onto his horse, his strong hands spanning her waist. Fiona gasped at the sudden contact. No man had ever handled her with such familiar ease before. He swung up behind her in one fluid motion, his chest warm against her back as he reached around her for the reins. "Hold tight," he murmured, his breath warm against her ear. "Thunder spooks easy, but he's sure-footed." As the horse began to move beneath them, Fiona found herself pressed against Owen's solid form, his arm a protective barrier around her waist. The intimacy of their position made her cheeks burn despite the cold. She had never been this close to a man before, my family. She began, feeling she owed him some explanation. Can wait until you're dry and warm, Owen interrupted gently. Whatever sent you running into the storm can be dealt with after it passes. They rode in silence for a time, the rhythmic motion of the horse oddly comforting. Gradually, the silhouette of a ranch house emerged from the darkness, a substantial log structure with a wide porch and golden light spilling from its windows. Several outbuildings stood nearby, and a large barn loomed to one side. Circle Q Ranch, Owen announced as they approached. Been in my family for 3 generations. Not the biggest spread in Montana, but it's home. He guided the horse to the barn first, dismounting with easy grace before reaching up to help Fiona down. His hands lingered at her waist a moment longer than necessary, steadying her as her feet touched the ground. Wait here while I settle Thunder, he instructed, leading the horse into a stall. Fiona wrapped her arms around herself, watching as Owen efficiently removed the saddle and began rubbing the horse down with a cloth. There was something mesmerizing about the way he moved, confident and capable, with no wasted motion. He's beautiful, she commented, stepping closer to the stall. Owen glanced over his shoulder with a smile that transformed his serious face. He's the best cow horse I've ever trained. Found him wild as a Mustang 3 years back, half-starved and suspicious of humans. Took months to gain his trust. You must be patient, Fiona observed. Some things are worth the wait. His eyes held hers for a moment before he returned to his task. There's value in earning trust rather than demanding it. The subtle message wasn't lost on Fiona. He was giving her space, allowing her to decide how much to reveal about herself and why she'd been fleeing through the storm. Once Thunder was settled with feed and water, Owen led Fiona across the yard to the main house. The rain had eased somewhat, but they were still thoroughly drenched by the time they reached the porch. Mrs. Abernathy, Owen called as they entered. We have a guest in need of dry clothes and hot food. An older woman with silver-streaked hair appeared from what Fiona presumed was the kitchen, wiping her hands on her apron. Her eyes widened at the sight of Fiona's bedraggled form. Good heavens! Poor child, you're soaked to the bone. She hurried forward, her motherly concern making Fiona's throat tighten unexpectedly. It had been so long since anyone had looked at her with such genuine care. This is Mrs. Abernathy, Owen explained. She's kept this house running and me fed since I was knee-high to a grasshopper. Mrs. Abernathy, Miss Fiona Zephyr. Found her on the East Road, Owen continued. Storm caught her by surprise. Fiona noticed he offered no further explanation, protecting her privacy. Gratitude warmed her despite her sodden clothes. Well, let's get you out of those wet things before you catch your death, Mrs. Abernathy said, taking Fiona's arm. I'll find something that might fit you. You're a bit slimmer than I am, but I've got a few things that should do. As the older woman led her away, Fiona glanced back at Owen. He stood in the entryway, water dripping from his coat and hat, watching her with an expression she couldn't quite decipher. Thank you, she said softly. He nodded once. Get warm, Miss Zephyr. We'll talk when you're ready. Mrs. Abernathy led Fiona to a small but comfortable bedroom and helped her out of her sodden clothing. True to her word, she produced a simple cotton dress that hung a bit loose on Fiona's frame but was blessedly dry. She also brought a hairbrush and towel, leaving Fiona to dry her long auburn hair before the small fireplace that had been hastily lit. Alone for the first time since her desperate flight, Fiona sank onto the edge of the bed, emotions washing over her in waves. What had she done? She had left with nothing but the clothes on her back, no money, no possessions, no plan. Her uncle would be furious. Her cousins would mock her even more relentlessly if, when she was forced to return, a soft knock at the door interrupted her thoughts. Miss Zephyr. There's hot soup waiting when you're ready, Mrs. Abernathy called. Taking a deep breath, Fiona composed herself and opened the door. The older woman led her to a cozy dining room where Owen, now in dry clothes himself, waited at a large wooden table. He stood as she entered, his height more apparent now that they were no longer on horseback. He had changed into a clean white shirt and dark trousers, his hair still damp from his own washing up. "You look much better," he said, pulling out a chair for her. "Warm food will help with the rest." Mrs. Abernathy served them steaming bowls of beef stew and freshly baked bread before retiring to the kitchen with a knowing smile that made Fiona blush slightly. The stew was rich and flavorful, reminding Fiona how hungry she truly was. She hadn't eaten since breakfast, having been too upset by her family's latest cruelties to join them for the evening meal. They ate in companionable silence for a few minutes before Owen spoke. "I won't ask what drove you out in that storm, Miss Zephyr, but I'd like to know if there's someone who might be worried about your whereabouts." Fiona stared into her bowl. "No one who's worried in the way you mean," she answered truthfully. "My parents died when I was young. I've been living with my uncle's family in Silver Creek." "The Millers?" Owen asked, his brow furrowing. Silver Creek was the nearest town, about 15 miles from his ranch. "No, the Zephyrs. My Uncle Edgar took me in after my father, his brother, passed away." Owen nodded slowly. "I know of them." "Your uncle owns the mercantile, doesn't he?" "Yes. And makes sure everyone knows how gracious he's been to take in his poor orphaned niece," Fiona said, unable to keep the bitterness from her voice. She immediately regretted her candor. "I'm sorry. That was uncharitable of me." "No need to apologize for speaking the truth as you see it," Owen replied. He studied her for a moment. "Were you running away for good or just needing some distance for the night?" The directness of the question caught Fiona off guard. She had been so focused on escape that she hadn't truly considered what came next. I don't know," she admitted. "It was impulsive. My cousins were particularly cruel tonight and something inside me just broke." Owen's expression darkened. "Cruelty seems to run in some families like a bad strain of fever." There was a story behind those words, Fiona sensed, but she didn't press. Instead, she asked, "Do you have family nearby, Mr. Quinn?" "Owen, please," he smiled briefly. "Just my younger brother Samuel. He's in Helena studying law. Our parents passed 5 years ago, influenza. I've run the ranch since then." "I'm sorry for your loss," Fiona said softly. "Thank you. It was difficult, but they left us with something solid. Not everyone is so fortunate." He paused, considering her. "You said you were being mocked. May I ask what about?" Fiona traced the rim of her bowl with one finger. "I want to be a teacher. I applied for a position at the school in Cottonwood, the next town over. My cousins found my application letter and thought it was hilarious that I would think myself capable of such a position. They said no one would hire someone like me." "Someone like you." Owen's voice had an edge to it now. "Plain, bookish, odd." Fiona recited the familiar insults without emotion. "Too quiet, too serious, too different." "Different is rarely a flaw, Miss Zephyr, despite what some might think," Owen said. "And as for plain," he stopped abruptly, a hint of color touching his tan cheeks. "Well, that's a matter of opinion, isn't it?" The implication behind his words made Fiona's heart flutter strangely. No man had ever suggested, even obliquely, that he might find her attractive. "You enjoy teaching?" Owen asked, smoothly changing the subject. "I haven't had the opportunity yet formally. But I've been tutoring children in Silver Creek for the past few years, those whose parents can't afford the school fees or who need extra help." Fiona found herself smiling as she thought of her young pupils. There's nothing quite like seeing a child's face when understanding dawns. "That's a gift," Owen said, "helping others see what they couldn't before." Their conversation flowed more easily after that, touching on books they'd read, places they'd seen or hoped to see, and life in Montana territory. Fiona was surprised by Owen's thoughtfulness and breadth of knowledge. The cowboys she'd encountered in Silver Creek were typically rough-spoken men with little interest in literature or ideas beyond their immediate concerns. "You're surprised I can string together complete sentences about something other than cattle," Owen observed with amusement when she commented on his knowledge of Shakespeare. "I didn't mean, I know you didn't," he assured her, "but I see how people look at those of us who work the land. They think our hands are too callous to turn the pages of a book or our minds too simple to understand what we read." "That's not what I think," Fiona said earnestly. "No," Owen agreed, his eyes warm as they held hers. "I don't believe it is." The grandfather clock in the corner chimed 10 times, startling Fiona. She hadn't realized how late it had grown or how comfortable she'd become in this stranger's company. I don't know what I should do," she admitted, reality crashing back. "I can't impose on your hospitality indefinitely, but I have nowhere else to go." "You're welcome to stay as long as you need," Owen said without hesitation. "The storm's not likely to let up before morning anyway, and the roads will be mud pits by then." "I couldn't possibly." "You can and you will," he interrupted gently. "Mrs. Abernathy would have my hide if I sent you back out in this weather, even if I were inclined to do so, which I'm not." "Why are you being so kind to me?" Fiona asked, genuinely puzzled. "You don't know me." Owen considered her question carefully. "When I found Thunder my horse, he was wounded and afraid. Someone had mistreated him badly. It would have been easier to leave him be, find another mount without his issues, but something in his eyes." He paused. There was spirit there beneath the fear. "A will to trust again if given reason to." "You're comparing me to your horse?" Fiona asked, unsure whether to be offended or touched. Owen laughed, the sound rich and warming. "Poorly, it seems. What I mean is that sometimes we recognize something in another living being, human or animal, that calls to us. I saw you standing in that storm, soaked and alone, and I couldn't ride past." His honesty disarmed her. "Well, I'm grateful you didn't," she said softly. "Get some rest, Miss Zephyr. Things often look clearer in the morning light." As Mrs. Abernathy had predicted, the storm continued through the night, rain lashing against the windows of the guest room where Fiona lay. Despite her exhaustion, sleep came fitfully. She kept replaying the events that had led her here: her cousins finding her application letter, their sneering faces as they read it aloud at dinner, her uncle's dismissive wave when she tried to defend her ambitions. "Teaching requires authority, Fiona," he'd said. "You can barely speak above a whisper. Who would respect you as an educator?" The familiar hurt washed through her again. Why couldn't they see that she spoke quietly around them because they had taught her, through years of mockery, that her words held no value? With her young students, she found her voice easily enough. Dawn was breaking when Fiona finally gave up on sleep. She dressed in her own clothes, now dried by the fire, and made her way cautiously downstairs. The house was quiet, but she could smell coffee brewing. Following the aroma, she found Owen in the kitchen, his back to her as he stood at the stove. "You're up early," he said without turning, somehow sensing her presence. "I couldn't sleep," Fiona admitted. "Too many thoughts." Now he did turn, offering her a steaming cup. "Anything you'd care to share?" Fiona accepted the coffee gratefully. "I was thinking about what I should do next. I can't go back to my uncle's house, not after running away like that, but I have no money, no position." "What about the teaching job in Cottonwood? You said you applied." "I did, but I haven't heard back, and even if they offered it to me, the term doesn't start for another month." Fiona sighed. "I don't know what I was thinking, running off without a plan." "Sometimes the body knows what the mind hasn't accepted yet," Owen said. "That it's time to leave, even before you know where you're going." There was wisdom in his words that belied his years. "You sound like you speak from experience," Fiona observed. A shadow crossed his face. "Let's just say I understand the need to make a clean break from a bad situation." Before she could ask more, Mrs. Abernathy bustled in, her face brightening at the sight of Fiona. "Good morning, dear. I hope you slept well despite the storm." "As well as could be expected, thank you," Fiona replied with a smile. There was something so comforting about the older woman's maternal presence. "The rain stopped, but the roads will be a mess," Mrs. Abernathy reported as she began preparing breakfast. "You're welcome to stay until things dry out a bit." "That's very kind, but I don't want to be a burden." Nonsense, it's a joy to have another woman around this place. Too much male company dulls the wits, she said with a wink at Owen, who chuckled good-naturedly. Mrs. Abernathy keeps me humble, he told Fiona, says it's her Christian duty. The easy banter between them spoke of long affection and respect. It was so different from the strained politeness and underlying resentment that had characterized Fiona's interactions with her uncle's family. After breakfast, Owen suggested a tour of the ranch. The mud's bad, but I can show you around the barn and corrals at least. Might help clear your head. Fiona readily agreed, eager to see more of Owen's world. He provided her with a pair of boots that had belonged to his mother. She had small feet, like you, and a heavy coat to ward off the morning chill. The rain had indeed stopped, leaving behind puddles that reflected the blue sky and a fresh, clean scent in the air. Owen led her first to the main barn, a sturdy structure that housed several horses, including Thunder. The big bay whickered softly when he saw Owen, extending his head over the stall door. "He remembers you from last night," Owen said as Fiona cautiously approached. "He doesn't usually take to strangers so quickly." "Hello, handsome," Fiona murmured, letting the horse sniff her hand before gently stroking his velvety nose. "Thank you for the ride." "He likes you," Owen observed, watching them with evident pleasure. "He's a good judge of character." From the barn, they moved to the corrals where several cowboys were already at work despite the muddy conditions. They tipped their hats respectfully as Owen introduced Fiona, their curious glances carefully schooled into politeness. "Don't mind them," Owen said as they walked on. "We don't get many visitors out here, especially not." "Women?" Fiona supplied with a small smile. "Pretty ones," he corrected, then cleared his throat as if embarrassed by his forthrightness. "The bunkhouse is over there, that's where the hands stay, and beyond is the cookhouse." "Cookie, that's Mr. Hollister makes the best flapjacks this side of the Mississippi." As they walked, Owen explained the workings of the ranch, the cattle operations, the breeding program he was developing for horses, and his plans for expansion. His passion for the land and animals was evident in every word, and Fiona found herself increasingly fascinated by this man who had quite literally swept her off her feet the night before. "What made you decide to be a teacher?" Owen asked as they paused by a small stream that cut through the property, swollen now with the recent rains. "My mother was a teacher before she married my father," Fiona explained. "She taught me to read when I was very young, and I've loved books ever since. After she died, books became my escape from—" She hesitated. "From reality, I suppose." "From your uncle's family," Owen surmised. Fiona nodded. "They never wanted me there. My uncle took me in out of obligation, not affection. My aunt resented having another mouth to feed, and my cousins," she broke off, the hurt still too raw. "They found many ways to make me feel unwelcome." "Yet you stayed for 14 years, Owen said. It wasn't a question, but there was no judgment in his tone. "Where else could I go?" "I was a child when my parents died, and later when I was old enough. I suppose I just accepted that this was my lot in life." Fiona stared at the rushing water. "Until yesterday." "What changed yesterday?" "They found my application letter to the school board in Cottonwood. I'd been so careful to keep it hidden, but my cousin Mary was snooping in my things. They read it aloud at dinner, laughing at my presumption in thinking I could be a teacher." Fiona's voice strengthened as she continued, "But it wasn't just that. It was a lifetime of small cruelties suddenly crystallizing into something I could no longer bear, so I ran. Straight into a storm," Owen said softly. "It seemed fitting at the time." Fiona managed a small smile, "Though I'm beginning to think it might have been the best decision I ever made." Their eyes met, and something unspoken passed between them, a recognition, perhaps, of kindred spirits. For a moment, Fiona thought Owen might reach for her hand, but a shout from the direction of the ranch house broke the spell. "Boss, rider coming in," one of the cowboys called. Owen straightened, his expression shifting to concern. "We're not expecting anyone today." They hurried back toward the main house, where a mud-splattered rider was dismounting. The man removed his hat as they approached, revealing thinning hair and a narrow face that Fiona recognized with a jolt of fear. "Uncle Edgar," she whispered, instinctively stepping closer to Owen. Edgar Zephyr's gaze locked onto Fiona, his thin lips pressing into a disapproving line. "There you are, girl. You've caused quite a stir back home, running off like some wild thing in the night." "Mr. Zephyr." Owen stepped slightly in front of Fiona, his posture protective. "I'm Owen Quinn. Your niece was caught in the storm last night. I brought her here for shelter." Edgar barely spared Owen a glance. "A situation for which I'm sure we're all appropriately grateful, Mr. Quinn. However, I've come to take Fiona home where she belongs." "No." The word escaped Fiona's lips before she could consider the consequences. Both men turned to look at her, Owen with surprise and something like pride, Edgar with cold anger. "I beg your pardon," her uncle said, his voice dangerously quiet. Fiona lifted her chin, drawing strength from Owen's solid presence beside her. "I said no, uncle. I'm not going back." "Not after what happened yesterday." "You're being dramatic, as usual." Edgar dismissed her with a wave of his hand. "Your cousins were simply having a bit of fun. There's no need for all this theatricality." 14 years of a bit of fun is enough, Fiona said, her voice steadier than she felt. "I'm 22 years old. I'm capable of making my own decisions." "Decisions?" Edgar laughed harshly. "Like running away in a thunderstorm without a penny to your name, very rational." "What exactly do you plan to do now, Fiona? You have no money, no position, no skills beyond basic household tasks which, I might add, you've never performed particularly well." Each word was calculated to diminish her, to remind her of her dependence and inadequacy. It was a familiar tactic, one that had worked countless times before. But something had changed in Fiona since last night, since Owen had lifted her onto his horse and shown her a different kind of treatment was possible. "I have skills, Uncle Edgar. I'm a good teacher, whether you choose to acknowledge it or not, and I'll find a way to support myself." "As what? A frontier schoolmarm? Don't be absurd. No school board would hire you without references, which I certainly won't provide after this display of ingratitude." Edgar's gaze shifted to Owen. "Mr. Quinn, I appreciate your hospitality toward my niece, but this is a family matter. Fiona, get your things. We're leaving." "She doesn't have to go if she doesn't want to," Owen said quietly, his tone level but with steel beneath it. "Miss Zephyr is welcome to stay here as long as she needs." Edgar's eyes narrowed as he reassessed the tall rancher. "I see. And what exactly is your interest in my niece, Mr. Quinn? She has no dowry, no prospects." "If you're thinking of my interest, Mr. Zephyr, is in ensuring that a young woman isn't forced to return to a household where she's clearly unwelcome and unhappy." Owen interrupted, a flush of anger coloring his cheekbones. "Beyond that, my intentions are my own business." The tension between the two men was palpable. Fiona could see her uncle measuring Owen his evident prosperity, his commanding presence, and the respect shown to him by the cowboys who had gathered at a discreet distance, watching the confrontation with wary interest. "Fiona," Edgar said finally, his tone modulating to something almost reasonable. "Your aunt was worried sick when she found your bed empty this morning. Whatever grievances you think you have, this isn't the way to address them. Come home and we can discuss your future more rationally." It was the closest thing to an olive branch her uncle had ever extended, but Fiona wasn't fooled. Once back under his roof, any promises would evaporate and she would be punished subtly but thoroughly for her defiance. "My future is for me to decide," she said firmly. "Please tell Aunt Margaret I'm sorry for any worry I caused her, but I won't be returning." Edgar's face hardened. "Then you leave me no choice but to wash my hands of you entirely. Don't come crying to us when this situation inevitably sours. You are no longer welcome in my home." The finality of it struck Fiona like a physical blow. Despite everything, these people were the only family she had known for most of her life. But the relief that followed was even more powerful, a lifting of a weight she hadn't fully acknowledged until it was gone. "I understand," she said simply. With a last contemptuous look at both of them, Edgar jammed his hat back on his head and remounted his horse. "Good day, Mr. Quinn. I trust you know what you're taking on." With that parting shot, he wheeled his horse around and rode away, not sparing Fiona another glance. As the sound of hoofbeats faded, Fiona became acutely aware of Owen standing beside her, and of the cowboys trying not to stare openly at the drama that had unfolded. She felt suddenly exposed and vulnerable. "I should go inside," she murmured, turning toward the house. Owen followed her, dismissing his men with a nod. Once they were alone in the parlor, he spoke. "Are you all right?" "I don't know," Fiona answered honestly. "I've just been disowned by the only family I have left in the world. I should be devastated." "But you're not," Owen observed. "No." Fiona looked up at him with wonder. "I feel free." A sudden laugh escaped her, half joyous, half terrified, and completely adrift. "What am I going to do now, Owen? My uncle wasn't wrong about everything. I have no money, no position secured." "You have options," Owen said. "More than you might think. Such as, for one, Mrs. Abernathy has been complaining for months that she needs help around the house. She's not as young as she once was, and the place is too much for one person to manage properly." "Are you offering me a job?" Fiona asked, surprised. "I'm offering you a choice," Owen corrected. "You could work here, earn your keep and save money while you wait to hear from the school in Cottonwood. Or, if you prefer, I could arrange transportation to Helena or another larger town where you might find other opportunities." "You would do that for me?" After knowing me less than a day, Owen's expression softened. "Miss Zephyr, Fiona, I believe in helping people stand on their own feet, not keeping them dependent. If you stay here, it would be as an employee who earns her wage fairly, not as a charity case." The distinction was important to Fiona, who had lived too long with the bitter taste of obligation. "I would like that," she said. "To stay, I mean, at least until I hear from Cottonwood." "Good," Owen said, a smile breaking across his face. "Mrs. Abernathy will be delighted." "And so am I," he added more quietly. Over the next few weeks, Fiona settled into life at Circle Q Ranch. Mrs. Abernathy was indeed thrilled to have help with the household duties, and proved to be a patient teacher of the domestic arts that Fiona's aunt had never bothered to instruct her in properly. She learned to make preserves from the early summer berries, to bake bread that actually rose properly, and to manage the endless laundry that a working ranch generated. But it was the evenings that Fiona came to treasure most. After dinner, she and Owen would often sit on the porch if the weather was fine, or in the cozy parlor if it wasn't, and talk for hours. He told her stories of growing up on the ranch, of the challenges and joys of ranch life, and of his dreams for the future. In turn, she shared memories of her parents, her love of literature, and her hopes of becoming a teacher. Gradually, their conversations grew deeper, touching on beliefs, fears, and the experiences that had shaped them. Owen spoke of the devastation of losing both parents in the same week to influenza, and how he'd had to become the head of the household overnight at 22. Samuel was only 17, he recalled one evening as they sat watching the sunset paint the western sky in shades of orange and gold. "Still in school, I wanted him to finish, to have the chances I didn't, so I took over the ranch, made sure he could go on to study law like he wanted." "That was a tremendous sacrifice," Fiona said softly. Owen shrugged. "It wasn't a sacrifice, really. The ranch was always where I belonged." Samuel's different, always had his nose in a book, arguing cases even as a boy. He smiled at the memory. "Like you with your teaching, some callings choose us, I think, rather than the other way around." As May turned to June, Fiona became increasingly integrated into ranch life. The cowboys, initially awkward around her, gradually accepted her presence. She began helping some of the younger hands with their reading and writing during their off hours, finding joy in teaching even in this informal setting. Owen watched her bloom with quiet satisfaction. The timid, rain-soaked woman he'd found on the road was transforming before his eyes into someone confident and purposeful. Her laughter came more freely now, her voice stronger when she spoke. Even her posture had changed. She stood straighter, as if no longer expecting a blow to fall at any moment. One evening in mid-June, Fiona was hanging laundry in the yard when Owen rode in, his expression unusually serious. Her heart sank as she noticed the envelope in his hand. "From Cottonwood," he said without preamble, holding it out to her. "Came in with the supply wagon." Fiona took the letter with trembling fingers. This was what she had been waiting for, hoping for, yet now that the moment had arrived, she felt strangely conflicted. "You want privacy to read it?" Owen asked gently. She shook her head. "No, stay, please." Taking a deep breath, Fiona broke the seal and unfolded the letter. Her eyes scanned the formal language, her expression giving nothing away until she reached the end. Then she looked up at Owen, her eyes shining with tears. "They've offered me the position," she whispered. "Starting in September. The school board president says my references from the families I've tutored were most impressive." "Fiona, that's wonderful." Owen's genuine pleasure in her success warmed her heart. "I knew you could do it." "I can't believe my uncle was wrong," she said, still staring at the letter in wonder. "They want me. They actually want me to teach their children." "Of course they do. Anyone with eyes can see what a gifted teacher you are." Impulsively, Fiona threw her arms around Owen's neck, hugging him tightly. "Thank you for believing in me when no one else did." For a moment, Owen seemed startled by her embrace, but then his arms came around her waist, holding her close. "Always," he murmured against her hair. The word hung between them, laden with meaning. Fiona became acutely aware of their proximity, of the solid warmth of his chest against hers, of his hands at her waist. Slowly, she drew back just enough to look up into his face. What she saw there made her breath catch a tenderness and desire so plainly written that she couldn't mistake it. Owen's gaze dropped to her lips, then back to her eyes, questioning. Fiona had never been kissed before, but in that moment, she wanted nothing more than to know what Owen Quinn's kiss would feel like. She lifted her face slightly in silent invitation. The first touch of his lips against hers was gentle, almost reverent, a question rather than a demand. When she responded, leaning into him with a small sigh, his embrace tightened, the kiss deepening into something that sent heat coursing through her veins. When they finally parted, both breathless, Owen rested his forehead against hers. "I've been wanting to do that since the first night you were here," he admitted, "but I didn't want you to think I expected anything in return for helping you." "I never thought that," Fiona assured him. "Not for a moment." He smiled, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear with tender fingers. "Good, because I respect you too much for that kind of bargain." The sound of a throat clearing made them spring apart. Mrs. Abernathy stood a few yards away, her expression a mixture of amusement and satisfaction. "I see congratulations are in order," she said, indicating the letter Fiona still clutched in one hand. "And perhaps for more than just the teaching position." Fiona blushed furiously, but Owen laughed, keeping one arm around her waist. "Mrs. Abernathy, your timing is impeccable as always." "Dinner's ready," the older woman said with a knowing smile. "Don't let it get cold." She turned and headed back to the house, humming a wedding march just loudly enough for them to hear. "She's incorrigible," Owen said fondly. "She cares about you," Fiona replied, "about your happiness. She's not the only one." Owen's expression grew serious again. "Fiona, I know this is sudden. We've only known each other a short time, and you've just received this wonderful opportunity in Cottonwood. I don't want to stand in the way of your dreams." "You're not," Fiona said quickly. "Owen, meeting you coming here, it's part of those dreams now. A part I never expected, but that I can't imagine being without." Relief flooded his features. "I feel the same way. When I found you in that storm, I had no idea you would become so important to me so quickly." "So what happens now?" Fiona asked. "Cottonwood is 20 miles from here." "It's too far to travel daily." "We'll figure it out," Owen promised. "Together." That night, Fiona wrote a letter to the school board in Cottonwood, accepting the position and inquiring about housing possibilities in the town. Over the next several weeks, Arrangements were made for her to board with the widow of the former schoolmaster, who had a small cottage near the school. Meanwhile, her relationship with Owen deepened. They rode together across the vast expanse of the ranch, picnicked by the stream where they had first begun to connect, and shared increasingly passionate kisses under the vast Montana sky. Fiona found herself falling deeply in love with this man who had quite literally rescued her from the storm of her former life. Yet as August approached, bringing the start of her teaching position ever closer, a shadow fell over their happiness. The reality of their imminent separation, even if only by 20 miles, weighed on them both. "I'll come to Cottonwood every weekend," Owen promised as they sat on the porch one evening, his arm around her shoulders. "And you can return here during school holidays." "It's not the same as seeing you every day," Fiona sighed, leaning against him. "I've grown used to that." Owen was quiet for a long moment, his fingers absently stroking her arm. "There is another solution," he said finally, "one I've been considering for some time." "Oh." Fiona looked up at him curiously. In response, Owen shifted, turning to face her directly. To Fiona's astonishment, he slid from the porch swing to one knee before her, taking her hands in his. "Fiona Zephyr, I know it hasn't been long, but I've never been more certain of anything in my life. I love you. Your strength, your kindness, your determination, everything about you calls to something in me I didn't know was missing until I found you." He reached into his pocket and withdrew a small ring with a modest diamond. "This was my mother's. I'd be honored if you would wear it as my wife." Tears sprang to Fiona's eyes as she looked from the ring to Owen's earnest face. "Owen, this is so unexpected." A flicker of uncertainty crossed his features. "Is it too soon?" "I don't mean to rush you, Fiona. We could have a long engagement if you prefer, give you time to be sure." "No," Fiona interrupted, squeezing his hands. "It's not too soon. I love you too, Owen, more than I thought possible." "Is that a yes?" he asked, a smile beginning to form. "Yes," Fiona laughed through her tears. "Yes, I'll marry you." Owen slipped the ring onto her finger, then rose to gather her in his arms, lifting her off her feet in his exuberance. Their kiss was full of promise and joy, a sealing of the bond that had formed between them since that stormy night. "When?" Fiona asked breathlessly when they finally parted. "I'm supposed to start teaching in 3 weeks. "As soon as possible," Owen replied. "This weekend, we could ride into Silver Creek, find the preacher." "Silver Creek," Fiona tensed. "I don't know if I'm ready to face my family yet." Owen's expression softened with understanding. "Then we'll go to Cottonwood instead, meet your new neighbors at the same time we become husband and wife." The idea appealed to Fiona. A fresh start in every way. "Exactly." Owen kissed her again, more gently this time. "Mrs. Abernathy will be beside herself with joy. She's been dropping hints about grandchildren since the day you arrived." Fiona blushed at the implication, but the thought of having a family with Owen, a real family built on love and respect, filled her with happiness. "I can't wait to tell her." As expected, Mrs. Abernathy was overjoyed at the news. She immediately began planning a small but festive wedding feast to follow the ceremony, and helped Fiona alter one of her better dresses into something suitable for a bride. The next few days passed in a whirlwind of preparation. Owen rode to Cottonwood to make arrangements with the local minister and to meet with Mrs. Holloway, the widow with whom Fiona was to board. He returned with surprising news. "Mrs. Holloway has the most interesting proposition," he told Fiona as they walked arm in arm through the garden Mrs. Abernathy maintained behind the house. "She says her cottage is really too large for one person, and she's been considering moving in with her daughter and Helena." "But where would I stay if she leaves?" Fiona asked, concerned. "That's just it. She's willing to sell the cottage to us at a very reasonable price. It's small but well built with 2 bedrooms and a nice garden plot, close enough to the school for you to walk easily." Fiona stopped walking, turning to face him. "You want to buy a house in Cottonwood, but what about the ranch?" "I'll still run the ranch, of course, but I could spend 3 or 4 days a week in Cottonwood with you and the rest here overseeing operations." Owen took her hands in his. My foreman, Jackson, is more than capable of handling things when I'm away. He's been with the family since my father's time. You would do that. Split your time that way just so we could be together more, Fiona, Owen said seriously. I would do much more than that to make you happy. This is a compromise that lets us both pursue what matters to us. You're teaching me the ranch, and eventually when we start a family. He paused, a soft smile playing at his lips. Well, we'll figure that out too. Tears of happiness welled in Fiona's eyes. I love you so much, Owen Quinn. And I love you, almost Mrs. Quinn, he replied, drawing her close for a kiss. Saturday dawned clear and bright, as if nature itself approved of their union. Owen and Fiona, accompanied by Mrs. Abernathy and two of the senior ranch hands as witnesses, rode to Cottonwood in the ranch's best wagon, decorated with wildflowers for the occasion. The small church at the edge of town was simple but charming, with stained glass windows that cast colorful patterns across the wooden pews. The minister, Reverend Thompson, greeted them warmly, having been forewarned of their arrival. It's not often I get to perform a wedding with so little notice, he commented as he led them inside. But Mr. Quinn was quite persuasive about the urgency. Thank you for accommodating us, Reverend, Fiona said, suddenly nervous now that the moment had arrived. Any friend of Mrs. Holloway is welcome here, the minister assured her. She speaks very highly of you, Miss Zephyr. Our town is fortunate to have secured such a qualified teacher. The ceremony itself was brief but meaningful. Standing before the altar, holding Owen's strong hands in hers, Fiona felt a sense of rightness that transcended the unconventional nature of their courtship. When Owen slipped the simple gold band on her finger to join the engagement ring, his hands were steady, his eyes full of love and certainty. I now pronounce you husband and wife, Reverend Thompson declared with a broad smile. You may kiss your bride, Mr. Quinn. Owen needed no further encouragement. His kiss was tender yet possessive, a promise of the life they would build together. When they turned to face their small audience, Mrs. Abernathy was dabbing at her eyes with a handkerchief, beaming through her tears. After the ceremony, they enjoyed the wedding feast Mrs. Abernathy had prepared, sharing it with Reverend Thompson, Mrs. Holloway, and several other townspeople who had been curious enough to investigate the unexpected wedding taking place in their church. It was a far cry from the elaborate celebrations Fiona had witnessed in Silver Creek, but it was perfect in its simplicity and warmth. Later, they toured the cottage that would soon be their second home. It was indeed small, but well-maintained and cozy, with a garden that would burst with flowers come spring. Fiona could already envision herself grading papers at the kitchen table while Owen read by the fire in the evenings. It's perfect, she declared, squeezing Owen's hand. It will be, he agreed. Once you're in it. They spent their wedding night at the small hotel in Cottonwood, the innkeeper's wife having hurriedly prepared the best room when she learned of the newlyweds' arrival. Fiona was nervous as Owen closed the door behind them, suddenly shy despite the passion they had already shared in their kisses. Owen sensed her apprehension. We don't have to rush anything, Fiona, he said gently, taking her hands in his. We have all the time in the world. But Fiona's nervousness stemmed more from inexperience than reluctance. I want to be your wife in every way, Owen, she said softly. I don't know what to do. The tenderness in his eyes nearly undid her. We'll learn together, he promised. Just tell me if anything makes you uncomfortable. His gentleness and patience that night showed Fiona yet another facet of the man she had married. In his arms, she discovered a passion she hadn't known she possessed, and a depth of intimacy that bound them together even more completely than their vows. The next morning, they returned to Circle Q Ranch, now as husband and wife. The Cowboys had prepared a surprise of their own, a sign over the main house that read, Welcome Home, Mr. and Mrs. Quinn, and a rowdy celebration that lasted well into the evening. As August drew to a close, Fiona prepared for her first day as the schoolteacher in Cottonwood. Owen had arranged for the cottage to be furnished simply but comfortably, and had personally built bookshelves for Fiona's growing collection of teaching materials and personal volumes. "Are you nervous?" he asked the night before she was to begin, as they lay together in their bed at the ranch. "A little," Fiona admitted, "but mostly excited. It's everything I've worked for." "You'll be wonderful," Owen said with complete confidence. "Those children don't know how lucky they are to have you." "I'm the lucky one," Fiona said, snuggling closer to his warmth. "A few months ago, I was trapped in a life of quiet desperation. Now I have everything I ever dreamed of and so much I never dared to dream." "All because you had the courage to run away in a thunderstorm," Owen murmured, pressing a kiss to her temple. "And because a cowboy lifted me onto his horse and rode away," Fiona added with a smile. "My hero. Always," Owen promised, drawing her into his arms. The next morning, Owen drove Fiona to Cottonwood in time for her first day of school. Standing before the small schoolhouse, she smoothed her dress nervously as parents began arriving with their children. "I should go," Owen said reluctantly. "Let you establish yourself without your husband hovering. You'll be back on Friday." Fiona confirmed, already feeling the impending separation keenly. "Wild horses couldn't keep me away," he assured her, giving her a quick kiss. "Good luck, Mrs. Quinn. Show them what you're made of." With those words of encouragement, Fiona squared her shoulders and entered the schoolhouse to greet her students. As she had hoped, the children responded well to her gentle but firm approach, their initial wariness giving way to engagement as the day progressed. By the time the last child had departed, Fiona was exhausted but exhilarated. She gathered her materials and walked the short distance to the cottage, her cottage. She reminded herself with a surge of pride. To her surprise, she found a small package on the doorstep with her name on it. Inside was a beautiful journal bound in soft leather with a note in Owen's distinctive handwriting. "For all the stories yet to be written, I'm proud of you. Love, O." Tears pricked at Fiona's eyes as she clutched the journal to her chest. How had she gotten so fortunate? To have found not only her calling but a partner who supported her in pursuing it. The days fell into a rhythm as autumn progressed. Fiona taught during the week, growing more confident with each passing day. Owen divided his time between the ranch and Cottonwood as promised, never missing a Friday arrival no matter what ranch business demanded his attention. Their weekends together were precious, sometimes spent in Cottonwood, getting to know the community and preparing lessons for the coming week. Sometimes at the ranch, where Fiona had grown to love the wide open spaces and the ever-changing beauty of the land. In late October, Fiona received an unexpected visitor at the schoolhouse after classes had ended. She was erasing the chalkboard when she heard a tentative knock at the door. Turning, she was shocked to see her cousin Mary standing awkwardly in the doorway. "Mary!" Fiona exclaimed, nearly dropping the eraser. "What are you doing here?" Mary Zephyr looked uncomfortable, twisting her gloves in her hands. At 20, she was the youngest of Fiona's 3 cousins and had always been the least openly cruel, though she had never defended Fiona from the others' mockery either. I wanted to see how you were," Mary said, not quite meeting Fiona's eyes. "Father doesn't know I'm here." "He's still angry about everything." Fiona set down the eraser and approached her cousin cautiously. "How did you know where to find me?" "Everyone in Silver Creek knows you married Owen Quinn and became the schoolteacher in Cottonwood," Mary replied with a hint of her old petulance. "It's been quite the scandal." "I imagine it has," Fiona said dryly. "Please sit down." She gestured to one of the student desks. "Why did you really come, Mary?" Mary perched on the edge of the desk, still fidgeting with her gloves. "I'm getting married," she blurted out. "To Thomas Weatherby, the banker's son." "Congratulations," Fiona said, genuinely pleased for her cousin despite their complicated history. "Thomas seems like a kind young man." "He is," Mary agreed, a small smile softening her features. "But that's not why I came." She faltered, then continued in a rush. "I wanted to apologize, Fiona, for how we treated you. It wasn't right." Fiona stared at her cousin in astonishment. "What brought this on?" seeing you that night the night you left, the look in your eyes when you ran out into the storm." Mary shook her head. "It's haunted me, and then hearing how well you're doing now, how respected you are here, it made me realize how wrong we all were." The apology was unexpected and imperfect, but Fiona could sense the genuine remorse behind it. "Thank you for saying that, Mary. It means more than you know." "Are you happy, Fiona, truly?" Mary asked, finally meeting her gaze directly. "Happier than I ever thought possible," Fiona answered honestly. Mary nodded as if confirming something to herself. "Good, you deserve it." She stood abruptly. "I should go. Father will be suspicious if I'm gone too long." "Wait," Fiona said, making a sudden decision. Would you like to meet Owen? He'll be arriving from the ranch soon. We could have tea at our cottage." Mary hesitated, then nodded. "I'd like that if you're sure." The afternoon tea was initially awkward, but Owen's easy charm soon had Mary relaxing, even laughing at his stories of ranch mishaps. Fiona watched her husband win over her once hostile cousin with a mixture of pride and amazement. "Your husband is nothing like I expected," Mary confessed as Fiona walked her to her buggy later. "Father made him sound like some rough cowhand who'd stolen you away." Fiona smiled. "In a way, he did steal me away, but it was a rescue, not a theft." Mary's expression grew serious again. "I'm glad, Fiona, and I'm sorry again for everything." "Perhaps you could visit again sometime," Fiona suggested. "Bring Thomas. We could have dinner together." "I'd like that," Mary said, surprising herself as much as Fiona with her sincerity. As Fiona watched her cousin drive away, Owen came to stand beside her, slipping an arm around her waist. "That was unexpected," he commented. "Life is full of surprises lately," Fiona agreed, leaning against him. "Most of them good." "Speaking of surprises," Owen said, turning her to face him. "I have something to tell you." "Oh," Fiona raised an eyebrow. "More furniture for the cottage? Better." Owen's eyes danced with excitement. "I received a letter from Samuel today. He's finished his law studies and is moving back to Montana. He's going to set up practice in Cottonwood." "Owen, that's wonderful," Fiona exclaimed. "You must be so happy to have him closer." "I am," Owen agreed, "but there's more. He's bringing his new wife with him, a girl he met in Helena, and they're expecting their first child in the spring. Your brother is married and going to be a father." Fiona laughed in delight. "Mrs. Abernathy will be beside herself with joy." "She already is. I told her before I left the ranch." Owen's expression softened as he gazed at Fiona. "It got me thinking about our own future, about the family we might have someday." Fiona's heart skipped a beat. "Oh. And what were you thinking, Mr. Quinn?" "That I'd like to see you holding our child in your arms," he said simply. "Whenever you're ready for that step." The image he painted was so vivid, so appealing, that Fiona felt a sudden yearning she hadn't allowed herself to acknowledge before. "I think," she said slowly, "that I might be ready sooner rather than later. The school term ends in May and I could take some time away." Owen's face lit up with joy. "Really, you'd want that?" "With all my heart," Fiona assured him. "A family of our own, Owen. Something neither of us really had growing up, but that we can create together." He pulled her close, his kiss full of promise and passion. "I love you, Fiona Quinn," he murmured against her lips. "More every day." "And I love you," she replied. "My cowboy, my rescuer, my home." As winter settled over Montana, Fiona and Owen's life together deepened in contentment and shared purpose. Samuel and his wife, Emily, arrived in Cottonwood just before the first heavy snowfall, bringing new energy and connection to their lives. Emily, gentle and intelligent, quickly became a dear friend to Fiona, the sister she had never had. Christmas was celebrated at the ranch, with Mrs. Abernathy outdoing herself to welcome the expanding family. Sitting by the fire that night, surrounded by loved ones, Fiona reflected on the extraordinary journey that had brought her here, from a frightened young woman fleeing into a storm to a confident wife, teacher, and soon-to-be sister-in-law. "Penny for your thoughts," Owen murmured, joining her on the window seat where she was watching snow fall softly outside. "I was just thinking about how much can change in a year," Fiona replied, leaning against him. Last Christmas, I was reading alone in my room while my cousins celebrated downstairs. And this Christmas, Owen prompted, stroking her hair. Fiona smiled up at him, her heart full. This Christmas, I'm exactly where I belong. As the new year dawned, bringing with it the promise of spring and new beginnings, Fiona found herself standing once more before the stream where she and Owen had first begun to know each other. The water flowed freely now, ice having melted in the unusually warm February sunshine. "It's hard to believe it will be a year soon," she remarked as Owen joined her, wrapping his coat around both of them against the lingering chill. "The best year of my life," he said, pressing a kiss to her temple. Fiona turned in his embrace, her eyes shining with a secret joy. "It's about to get even better," she whispered. "Owen, I'm with child." His expression transformed from surprise to wonder to pure joy in the space of a heartbeat. "Fiona," he breathed, lifting her off her feet in a gentle embrace. "Are you certain?" "As certain as I can be," she laughed as he set her down carefully. "Dr. Williams confirmed it yesterday when you were out with the herd. We're going to have a baby in late August." Owen dropped to his knees before her, pressing his ear to her still flat stomach as if he might hear the tiny life growing within. "Hello in there," he said softly. "I'm your pa, and I already love you more than I can say." Tears sprang to Fiona's eyes at the tenderness of the moment. This was what she had run toward on that stormy night, though she hadn't known it then, not just escape from cruelty, but the discovery of a love so pure and true that it could create new life. "Thank you," Owen said, rising to take her in his arms again, "for running away that night. For trusting me enough to climb onto my horse, for becoming my wife and now the mother of my child." "Thank you for finding me," Fiona replied, her voice thick with emotion. "For seeing value in me when no one else did, for lifting me up in every way a person can be lifted." As they stood together by the stream, planning their future and dreaming of the child to come, Fiona knew with absolute certainty that her impulsive flight into the storm had been the most courageous act of her life, and the best decision she had ever made. For in running away from those who had belittled her, she had run straight into the arms of the man who would cherish her always. The cowboy who had lifted her onto his horse and ridden away had carried her not just to safety, but to a life filled with purpose, respect, and love beyond measure.